What is the biggest change that I've seen in the evangelical church? And before I answer that, I have to confess that it is very hard for me to see myself as old, though I am. I don't feel old. I don't think of myself as old. I think of myself as young, in fact. But the truth is, I have been conscious, if you will, of what's going on in particular churches for half of a century. About the time that I was 5, I started... that was the first church that I remember being a part of. It was College Hill Presbyterian Church in Cincinnati, Ohio. When I was 6, we moved to Western Pennsylvania and became a part of Pioneer Presbyterian Church in Ligonier, Pennsylvania. And over the course of that 50 years, I would say that I've seen some very positive things and some very, very negative things. Let me start with the positive things. I think it's fair to say, and I don't want to overgeneralize. I don't want to suggest that the experience that I had was universal by any stretch. But here's what I had as an experience. There was a sense, and maybe it was in my head too, there was a sense when I was younger that church was a kind of moral obligation, a kind of duty. There was a very heavy scent of religion about it. This is what we do to demonstrate our commitment. I remember just the singing of the hymns, which, again, I love hymns, still love hymns to this day, but I remember feeling like we were droning our way through them. There was no zeal. There was no vigor. It felt like every hymn was slowing down with each verse, like we're running out of power on the record player, and it's just spinning slower and slower. And that whole kind of drag yourself to church to do the right thing, again, I think it was pretty common. There was still a remnant in those days of what we call civil religion, this idea that if you're an upstanding member of your society, if you're important politically or in the business world, you'll find a church to go to, you'll be seen there. Sort of like Kiwanis for Sundays or something like that. And that was much more common. And then everything changed with the advent of the seeker-sensitive movement. Some of you may know, probably most of you don't know, that among some of the important, influential people who spent time when they were younger and less well-known at the old Ligonier Valley Study Center, among those people was one Bill Hybels. He was a student at the Ligonier Valley Study Center at the very beginning of his work at Willow Creek. And this was actually an idea that my father, believe it or not, for a long time was quite enamored with. He called it the Christian Cabaret, and he thought it was quite clever. But he eventually came to be not such a big fan of the whole seeker-sensitive model. But that is, of course, it's not just the type of music we sing. It's not just whether the pastor's in a robe or a tie or in a sweater. It's also just the way we look at what we're doing. We have bought into a consumer mentality. Church is not where you go to give. Church is where you go to get, and what you get is typically a kind of emotional experience. Now, I'm in favor of emotional experiences, by the way, and I'm in favor of emotional experiences when we gather for worship. They should be emotional experiences. But there's a very big difference between going to meet with the living God and going to get what I used to call the warm fuzzies, that kind of almost internal purr that you would get sitting around the campfire singing "It Only Takes a Spark." We have gone, this is a radical amount of change over the past 50 years. I may have to come and do a part 2 on this to consider this further because I'm out of time. But that is the first things that have come to my mind when I consider how the church has changed in the last 50 years.